Okay, we're continuing my playtest of Battle for a Continent. This will be part 2. Now in part 1, we ended the first half of 1756 and the British were not doing that well. The Royal Roussillon Regiment, which was late, is now coming in at Quebec City. So the French are going to be rather formidable right now. Also, the Iroquois Confederacy is in favor of the French. They haven't won them over yet, but it looks pretty good for the French. So for 1756, the British are going to have to get some nice dice and some nice rolls. Now, I've already decided after playing the part 1, I'm going to make some changes to 1755. I'm going to make 1755 a 2-turn year. And, well, anyway, I'll get to that later. I'm going to be making some changes there. So, let's continue. We begin the second half with the action point roll for the French. Okay, we're rolling for First Nations. Green die, First Nations. White die, land units. Holy cow. Well, it's going to be a very active year for the French. This does not look good for the British at all. So, 6 actions on land, 6 actions for the First Nations. Makes me wonder if I have to reevaluate the action phases here. I think the French are going to be able to be very aggressive. Let's take a look at their land moves. For Gore here, when he has a militia, a marine, could get Jonquière in there. He almost could counterattack here at Fort Lawrence. Well, I'm going to be super aggressive as the French. They've got nothing to lose. They've got so much in the way of movement. So I'll activate Jonquière, which is one of the Native American or First Nations action points. He'll activate and go 1, 2, and 3 right on to Moncton and assault Fort Lawrence. Now we'll spend an action point on moving Vergor. He still has to roll to move. Let's see what he rolls. And he does get to move. So he's going to go on an all-out assault on Fort Lawrence, bringing up one of his action points. Move the marker down. Let's look at the other options. Okay, well, in the center with Montcalm in command, he's such a good general. I think he'll activate, pick up Dieskau, and go on an all-assault on Albany. And if the French win that, I think the game is virtually over. So let's see if Montcalm moves. Anything but a 6, and he does. He does. Okay, Montcalm moves to here, Dieskau. You really should leave a garrison when you're going into enemy territory. So I'll leave one of the Montreal militia there. And the rest of the units, no use actually having 2 generals on one spot, so I'll leave Dieskau behind. And Montcalm will move with the whole shebang right onto Johnson. Like I said, this could be game-changing right there. If Montcalm wins, and I suspect he will, I don't think the British have a chance. Got off to a very bad start. Let's see what they can do in the West. What the heck. Okay, the First Nations will move, burn up an action point. They'll move Marin. And he's going to be able to do an all-out assault on Braddock. Kind of crazy, I know, but that's history. And games, you know what they're like. Anything can happen. Wide open. And I don't want to make arbitrary rules for not having Indian units attack and all that. So anyway, Marin goes in, 1, 2, 3, and we've got 3 major battles, and we've got tons of action points left. So I might as well just clean up the French rear. This could be a very short video, might end in 10 minutes, who knows. So they still got 3 action points left to move. So they really don't need to move. But okay, the roll for the Marine unit there. Rolls a 5, so he cannot move. That burns up an action. Okay, I'll try to move the Marine unit there at Cataraqui. Roll along. He does move. And he'll go and take Oswego. So we'll do the battles now, but I thought this would be another 20-25 minute video, but I suspect it's going to be over very soon. Let's do the battle at Alexandria. Well, the British should win this. They've got 2-to-1 odds, so it's like a 1-to-2 attack by the French. They've got Braddock, which adds nothing, but they've got regulars, and they can take more losses than the Indians can. And I wanted to show off some new rules I put in here after a victory, but that didn't happen the way the battles went. Anyway, the French roll first, and they're on the 7 table, 5-to-19, and away they go. They roll a 5, which isn't great, which actually is nothing. So maybe the British can win this one. So the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, they're on the 5-to-19 table and adding nothing too. So away we go. I might add something here too for towns because this is really an open field battle. For regulars against Indians. Indians don't like fighting in regular, so in the final edition I'll probably add one at least for defending in open fields. But that's not going to matter much, I don't think. The British roll, and they get a 4, which is abominable. Absolutely insane. Now, with the odds against them, I think the Indians should retreat. No use getting destroyed. Now here's where a rule I can demonstrate. Whenever the Indians are in a battle and they lose a battle, the Indians all go home. So what you do is you gather them up and you put them upside down in their villages. And that makes sense. So we have the Menominees, they get out of Dodge. Potawatomis get out of Dodge. The Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Kickapoos. Now notice they're not destroyed, they just took off. And Marin, he does a normal retreat from Alexandria, so he goes back and joins Langlade. So down at Alexandria, Braddock was able to win a victory, a defensive one, and against pretty crappy odds against the French, but he did win. And we all know what that means. That means the Iroquois Confederacy is quite impressed by that victory. And so we take a French Iroquois and flip it back to the British. So Braddock has won a defensive victory at Alexandria. Now for the one here that's really going to decide the game, this battle at Albany. Let's set it up. Okay, so we'll look at the modifiers. The French have a 2-to-1 over Johnson, so that gives them 1 on the dice. Montcalm gets to add 3, so we're going to have 4. It is taking place on a fortification. Albany is fortified, so the French lose 1. So they're really adding 3. And all players roll their dice completely separate. So, what did I say? 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. They're on the 5-to-19 table, and they are adding 3 to the dice. What do they inflict? 3, 6, I get a 9. They lose, the English lose only 1 step, which is pretty good. We'll lose it off of Pepperell's regiment. Now, combat is simultaneous, so Pepperell's loss is not taken into account just yet. Okay, the English are on the same table, the 5-to-19, and they get to add 1 for Johnson. So, it's kind of nice if the British rolled high here. Oh dear, not high enough. 6, they inflict 1 step loss on the French. The French will decide to, hit a militia. Remember, the militia doesn't permanently die, but they're going to be going home. Both sides seem confident enough to do a second round, so let's look at the modifiers. Still the same odds, so French roll round 2, and they're adding 3 to the dice. Oh, this ain't good. 13. They inflict 2 steps on Johnson. So Johnson will flip Shirley, maybe have one of these militia go home. Of course, because it is simultaneous, Johnson does take his fire. He's still on the same table, and he gets to add 1. Now the British need to roll high here. 8, it becomes 9. Nope, that's only 1 step. The French will lose another militia. Now we go to round 3 if Johnson decides to stick around. Well, I think it's almost hopeless for Johnson to defeat Montcalm. And since we're at the last turn of the year anyway, I think the only way the British are going to make a comeback is perhaps next year. So Johnson will decide to retreat. We're not even done yet, the turn, and it looks very bad for the British. Because one of my victory conditions is if the French hold Albany at the beginning of a turn and get New York or Boston, they win an instant victory. So the way the French are playing, they could get an instant victory next turn, unless things go, well, really bad. But it doesn't look good for the British. We still have a battle to resolve over at Fort Lawrence. But before we get to that, I have to remember that the Iroquois Confederacy was quite impressed by Montcalm's victory, so we get to flip one of these back to French. So if the French win the battle at Fort Lawrence, that would mean the Iroquois Confederacy would flip to entirely French, which is certainly not good. So let's resolve the battle at Fort Lawrence. Okay, we've got a weird battle here. Now, it's going to be close. It's going to be the dice for sure. Now, I would think the British should win it, but you know the dice. Anyway, it's 4-5, so it's a 1-2. So the French will be down 1 dice when they attack. They're also attacking a fort, so they're going to be down 2 pips on the dice. The British will be rolling on the 5 table and adding 1. So, I mean, with average luck, the British should hold them off. But the dice are fickle. So, we're doing the French roll now for the battle at Fort Lawrence. Oh, I misspoke there. I forgot the good old Abenaki. No, they actually have 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against 5. So it's a pretty even fight, although the British still have the fort and the fact that they got Moncton. So, for Gore, the French roll is just -1. Here we go. -1. They roll a 5, which becomes a 4. And that's a miss, which is maybe the little out that the British need. The British rolling on the 5 table and adding 1. And they roll a 9, which gives them 1 step against the French. Now the French, if they lose the Abenaki, they lose them for good. But the Abenakis are going to absorb the loss. Now Vergor has to decide whether he's going to stay. Well, he's going to be real gutsy, because if they take Fort Lawrence, the game will be so skewed. He's going to stick around. Even though he's got a 1-2, that'll give him 1 loss. And he's still attacking a fort. So he's going to be -2 to the dice. He's going to be grossly bold and attack here on the 1-4 attack, 1-4 table. He'll need mighty good dice to make a change here. And he rolls a 6, which becomes a 4, which is nothing. So here Moncton should be able to take it. He's on the 5 table and adding 1. It becomes a 9, another step loss for the French. Well, they'll use, temporarily, the Acadian militia. It comes off the board. And with that, Vergor will retreat from Fort Lawrence. Okay, with the victory at Fort Lawrence. Vergor retreated. We know what happens. The Mohawks, or the Iroquois, are quite impressed by that, and the Onondagas come over to the British. And that ends the French half of the turn. Now, can the British do anything to retrieve this disastrous game? Let's roll for their actions and see what they can do. Okay, the British roll the action track. The red dice is the sea lift capacity. They rolled 5 on sea lift, very good, but only 1 on the land action track. Oh, this is disastrous. So, the British can do 1 single land move and a half-decent sea lift one, but boy, there isn't much to do. Gonna have to really evaluate here. Boy, the British are really caught between a rock and a hard place. I could do my 1 land move, have Braddock do a counter march here against Marin. Yeah, that's iffy. Johnson, I could reinforce from Fort La Joie doing a sea move, moving 2 regulars to New York. That'll only help him in the spring. Moncton could attack Fort Beausejour, but he's low in factors too. But that would open up that whole front. It just doesn't look good. All right, I'll do a land move. It'll be Moncton that moves. He's missing the B in the counter, by the way. I'm going to fix that. So I'll roll to see if Moncton moves using the British's only land move. And he does move. Okay, so he goes to there. Now Murray, I'm anticipating ahead, but you better calculate for it. I'll do a sea lift move. I'll pick up the 2 units at Fort La Joie. That's 1 sea lift. Travel to New York, 2, and drop them off 3. So we've reinforced New York for the spring. So if Montcalm wants to take New York, well, it's going to be a battle. Plus, we have no idea what's coming from overseas next year. That's one thing I love about this game. So we have 1 battle at Fort Beausejour, and the British desperately need to win this. Okay, the odds are 5-3. Moncton gets to add 1 to this dice, but forts are -1, so he gets to add nothing. And Vergor is just a class C. He doesn't get to add anything. So it's going to be a very equal fight. We'll have the British roll first, and they're on the 5 to 19 factors. Let's go, British. Yeah. 6. Barely enough. 1 step loss. Well, it'll be Jonquière. They get to fire back. They're on the same table. They roll. They roll a 6, which is also 1 step. Boy, well, I guess the Nova Scotia militia will take the hit and go home. Now, the British do a round 2. Well, sure, why not? It's 2-1, giving them +1. And they have Moncton for another 1, which is +2. They're still attacking a fort, so they're really adding 1 to the dice. And Vergor is the same. But he's only on a 2 table now. So the British are now rolling on the 4 table, adding 1. They get a 5, which is a miss. French fire back. 2 table. They get a 5, which is a miss. Now, the French can retreat. At least they'd be intact. And the odds are against them, though. The French are ahead strategically. I think the French are going to be really bold, ridiculously bold, and stay. Okay. So the British are attacking. They got the 2-1, taking 1 off of the fort. So it's still basic, 4 table. They get a 7, which is still a miss. Ah, the French fire on the 2 table. They get a 5, which is a miss. Well, the French are going to keep holding on then. Okay, British will attack again. They get a 6, which is still a miss. The French fire back. Uh-oh. 11, one step. Oh no. Well, one regiment, but the British goes. Now the British are in real trouble. They've got to reevaluate. Let's see what the odds would be. Ah, the poor British. I goofed the modifiers. Moncton actually adds 2 to the dice, not 1. So I'll forget the other results and just go with it. Moncton then would be on the same table as the French, and he'd be adding 1, while the French would not. So he's going to stick around, and he's adding 1 to the dice. Finally, he gets a 12, and that's 2 steps, which does destroy Vergor. All right. In this game, if your whole force is destroyed, your leader still gets to retreat out. So Moncton takes Beausejour, which gives them, the British, the victory there. And the good old Iroquois converts back to the British. So the British salvaged the situation in 1756, but it still looks good for the French. So 1757, a lot is going to depend on what the devil gets over to the New World. So rather than have the video hang there, let's go to 1757 in the spring, see what happens. Now at the end of the turn, we have this go home phase. So wherever militia units are, they literally go home. That's French and English. So I'll do that first. I'll realign and send the militia home for the winter. Okay, the militia have gone home. And Montcalm's force changed size a little bit. He lost a unit. And most of the New England militia scattered, of course. Now, the rule for the Indians is not quite the same as the militia. Normally, the Indians would go home too, but if there's a coureur unit with the Indians, they stay on the board. Now, this Delaware does not have a coureur unit with him, so he goes home back to Delaware. And wherever there's Indians not on a coureur unit, goes home. So that's the way it looks at the end of 1756. Now we're going to do the naval phase the next year of 1757. And this is going to determine the game, I'm sure, depending on what reinforcements get to North America. All right. Now I just shuffled up the both sides. So good idea for solitaire when you're playing solitaire. Just shuffle them up. Don't make any decisions. Anyway, let's start at Louisbourg. We've got the naval squadron there, French. And it meets another naval squadron. So each are rolling a die. Red will be the British. Blue is the French. Who wins the naval battle off of Louisbourg? Looks like the British do. So that's the squadron gets to the New World. Okay, off in the Mediterranean, we've got the troop convoy. No, trade goods meeting a troop convoy. This will be interesting. So blue die for French, red die for British. The French win that one, so the trade goods get to the New World. We haven't seen what happens when the trade goods get there yet. And the last encounter is the troop convoy for the French and the raids. Now, troop convoy. See, the British really needed the troop convoy to get through that year. They really needed that, but they didn't get it. So it looks like a good year for the French again. Let's get this naval battle done. Okay, the raids succeeded. So that's what happened. French trade goods got through, a British naval squadron, and the raids were successful against the French. And we'll implement those results now. Now, because the raids worked against the French, any French regulars that would arrive this turn, in this case none, they'd have one less. So the raids had no impact, really, against the French. The naval squadron, British, means that one British regular does get to the New World. Make sure I got that right. Naval squadron, yeah. So I randomly draw a British regular. most of them are 4s, but sometimes you get the Highlanders that are 5s. And they draw Colonel Forbes' regiment. And it arrives at any controlled port. Well, for me, it's going to have to be New York. We've got to get Montcalm wave there. So that's done. Now, the trade goods. We haven't seen the effect of that yet. And here's what the trade goods convoy does. Okay, when your trade goods get through to the new year, you have 2 options. But most of the time, you take the first option. The second option is calling a militia muster. But militia musters happen anyway in the spring, so that's not something you want to do very often. I might change that in the game too. Why have it in if half the time you don't do it? So the trade goods you can do is you call a tribal council. And what happens is the French player takes 4 First Nations units and flips them to their graphic side and places them with any coureur units that are the original French holdings. Now the coureur units currently are not in the French holdings, I don't think. No, they're not. I probably will have to rewrite that rule because right now I've got 2 coureur units on the same space in Fort Cumberland, and that's not a good idea. So I'll probably rewrite that rule. And I'll put an asterisk beside that because that kind of doesn't make sense. So what we'll do is I'll rewrite it as he can redeploy 1 coureur unit at any Indian village where the Indians rally. And the First Nations can take 4 units and they can stack 5. So I'll take these 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they'll rally and activate at the Delaware village, and Marin will deploy there. So that's the result of the trade goods coming in. The Indians just love the French. Pardon me, I'm supposed to say First Nations. And that's what that does. Now see, that was cut off on the camera there. So there's where the rendezvous, the tribal council took place at the Delaware village. So the French certainly have the natives on their side and looking good for their side. Now, we have the militia muster. Okay, well, in the militia muster phase, the militia that were knocked out in battle get to come back on the board. You can always re-raise militia. They always would take off anyway. So, for the colonials, we've got some New York militia to redeploy, which we will do. And for the French, we'll put those on too. Okay, we've deployed the French militia in their towns, and we've put the New York militia spread out as much as I can. Now, I'll have to write a rule too about when a place is occupied. You're to spread out the militia as much as possible, but if you can't, you can rendezvous them at a space. So actually Johnson got a couple of New York militia there. Now I can see a couple of problems with the game already that I'm going to have to remedy. What's happening in our game, because of the die rolls, regular units are not getting to North America. Now, that was a problem to some degree in the game Wilderness War, where reinforcements only came in by card. And the way I've written the rules here, it's 1757 and hardly any British regulars have arrived. Now, it is true that the British did not make their big push till 1758. But what happens next year if I still don't get British regulars in? So I don't know. I'll have to work on that. Anyway, we're now going to roll for the French action points. Once again, white die is land. And I'll use the green die here for the First Nations. Roll the die. Well, finally they get a dry year. They get 1 First Nations roll and only 2 land rolls. That's much better for the British. Much better. Won't be a lot of French activity this year. So maybe it will balance out. Who knows? Oh, and I forgot, of course, these 2 guys come in 1757. Bradstreet comes in. He can come in at any friendly port. I'll have him come in at Alexandria. and Dumas will come in at Quebec. So we begin the game now with the French having 1 First Nations move and 2 land moves. Okay, the First Nations move, I think 1, 2, 3, 4. French continue to be aggressive. Okay, they have 2 land moves. Now, the situation here is quite different. Johnson now has a big army here. So I either reinforce Montcalm or have him retreat. Okay, one of the French moves, we're going to activate Dieskau. And he's going to move back to Quebec and try to get some men. So, this is cheap to move. It's 1, 2, 3. You can pick these guys up. And then 4 back to Montreal. So that's one of their land moves. They have 1 more land move yet. Montcalm's going to have to fall back. He's going to roll for his movement. Wow. Finally, the French get some bad luck. Montcalm rolled a 6, which means he can't move, which might mean that Johnson can counterattack him. So, that's it for the French move. Now we're going to roll for the English sea lift capacity and their land move. What do they get? Red die, sea capacity, white die, land movement. Sea capacity of 5, land movement of 2. Not great. The sea lift is nice. But that'll give Johnson time to move on Montcalm, which he's bloody well going to do. So I'll burn 1 action point land. Roll for Johnson. He's going to move 10 units on Montcalm. He does move. Okay, he's going to leave Murray with 1 damaged battalion at New York and move on top of Montcalm. So the British have 1 land move left, but they've got lots of sea power. Moncton, well, leave him there. I think Bradstreet will get going here. Okay, Bradstreet will move on Fort Cumberland. He's going to roll the die to see if he moves. He does. Bradstreet moves on to Langlade. And now we have 2 battles to fight. Okay, the odds are 9-6, which is 1-1. No modifiers there. The British must subtract 1 because they're attacking a fort. And that's it. So they're rolling on the 9 table, and they're minusing 1 to the dice. They got a 10. That's 1 step. So we'll have 1 Indian killed now. Combat is simultaneous. So the French fire, and they roll. They get an 11. They get 2 steps on the English. Well, they're going to lose a provincial and flip Dunbar's regiment. This unit is destroyed. Okay, round 2 would put it at 6-3, 6-4, which is still 1-1, still minusing 1. He's going to go in again, and the French, well, I don't know. Those Indians are pretty fragile. You know what? They're going to stay for 1 more round. Okay, the English, they're on the 6th table. Only 2 dice. Adding 2 for Bradstreet, but 1 less for the... So they're adding 1. Oh, no. 3. Yes. Yeah, absolute worst you could get. The British are just not having the dice. French are on the 4 table. They roll 5, which is much better. Well, the French, I think, will pull out. They got lucky there, and they know it. So, Langlade and the Shawnee will pull out. Now, here we actually have a new rule, which I have to explain. Because the Indians, well, actually, it's the same rule as last time. Because the Indians have lost a battle, the Shawnee go home. You take them off the board, flip them upside down, and the Choctaws. They're not dead, but they're just not in the battle anymore. Now the tables have turned a little bit because the English won a victory. One of the French units of the Iroquois turns to English. So now we got 4 against 2. So the Iroquois are getting favorably impressed with the British. Now we've got a very important battle here taking place at Albany, with Johnson being the attacker. Okay, with the combat results and the losses being what they are, the first initial rounds are very important. So we've got a 1-to-1 against the French. Johnson's going to be able to add 2 to the dice, but you have to take 1 off because he's still attacking a fort. Montcalm, on the other hand, will be adding 3 to the dice. So here's the British roll, adding 1 to the dice. 4 becomes a 5, which is nothing. I can't believe it. Anyway, the French now move, or rather roll. They're on the same table, but they're adding 3 to the dice. Wow! Snake eyes, I can't believe it. So they add 3 and becomes a 5, which is a bloody miss. That's amazing. Both rolled pretty crap. Don't think that's going to happen again. Okay, now the British roll again, round 2. Montcalm will stick around. It's just too even. There's no way he's going to retreat. British adding 1 to the dice. Holy cow. 3 becomes a 4. Nothing. Okay, Montcalm's roll. I got a feeling the French are just going to take it away again this turn. Adding 3 to the dice. Yep, they do. I want you to see the evidence. They rolled a 12. God. So that's 3 steps against the English. 3 steps. Oh. I'm going to take them off the provincial regiments. They're destroyed, and they do not come back into the game. They are not militia. This is not good. So, it's still, 12, 14 now to 12, 1-2. So, Johnson could retreat, but he's not. He figures he's owed at least 1 more good roll. Normally he adds 2, but the fortifications here, and he adds 1, but he's also got 1-2 odds. So he's adding nothing to the dice. Here he goes. On the 5-19 table. Finally, he gets an 11, and that's 2 steps against the French. Now they get to fire back. 2 steps. I'll just flip him and have him destroyed. Okay, the French get to fire back in their turn. They're adding 3 to the dice. 3 on the floor, no good. Well, finally, the luck changes. 4 plus 3 is 7. They inflict 1 step on the English, and the English will take it on their militia. Okay. Now, Montcalm has got the decision whether he wants to retreat or not. Okay, 12-13. Still 1-2. Montcalm still could win it. He's a stubborn old cod. So, yeah, the English will stay. It's still 1-2. So they're adding nothing. Straight die roll. 7. That's 1 step on Montcalm. Montcalm is still on the better table. And he's adding 2. Or pardon me, 3. Oh my God. 3 steps for the English. 1, 2, 3. Well, that'll clinch it. Johnson will have to stop his attack and retreat. Montcalm is invincible. Okay, he retreats back to New York. And Montcalm is still at Albany. However, his army is taking hits. The French can't really replace those losses. So the strategic situation is this. Montcalm is still at Albany. the English are still at New York. Now, the French won that victory, so the Iroquois gets fickle again, and we flip one back to the French. So, Iroquois Confederacy is still not decided, and neither is this game. That does end the first half of 1757, and I'll probably wrap the video there. I'm seeing what I need to see, what needs a little bit of tweaking, and I don't know, I hope it gives you a little bit of an idea of how the game plays. I've got to make a decision on garrisons. I don't want to make control markers, so I might insist that you have to leave a unit behind to garrison it. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet. So I'll wrap up the video for now, and I don't know if there'll be a part 3. This was just a test to show you what the game is going to be like. Thank you for watching.